Marie Delacourt sat silently in the attic room of the French embassy in Ouagadougou. From the small window, she could clearly see the Burkina Faso flag flying in front of the Square of Justice, where President Ibrahim Traoré had just finished a speech that had sent shockwaves across Africa. "You will not kill him. You will make him crumble from the inside." The directive from Commander Luc Morel still echoed in her head like a sentence of doom. Marie didn't carry a gun, no poison, no high-tech gadgets. Her only weapons were her words, her empathy, and her ability to read the deepest psychological wounds of anyone. 3 months ago, she arrived in Ouagadougou, posing as a freelance journalist specializing in conflict and peace. Her mission: to approach Traoré, understand his psychology, sow seeds of doubt within his ranks, and, if possible, shatter the empire of trust the people had placed in the young president. Marie had little trouble approaching Traoré. During a closed seminar on the psychology of war organized by the African Union, she was introduced to him as a conflict analysis expert. Traoré shook her hand, his eyes deep, untrusting, but not easily manipulated. He asked her a brief but haunting question. "What do you think justice is, Ms. Delacourt?" That question left Marie speechless. She had heard hundreds of definitions of justice from scholars, politicians, and even war criminals. But when it came from the mouth of a man who had just led a bloody coup and claimed he fought for African dignity, the words seemed fragile. In the following weeks, Marie was invited to join the president's special social policy advisory group, a mix of young scholars, independent intellectuals, and former opponents of the old system. She began to notice something unusual. Traoré did not control others through fear. He governed like a community leader, listening more than commanding, asking questions more than making statements. Marie had worked with many African leaders before, dictators wearing the mask of democracy, obedient puppets of Paris. But Traoré was different. He spoke to farmers as if they were scholars. He asked street children about their dreams. And when standing in the middle of an angry crowd, he didn't use bodyguards. He simply said, "Let me hear what you're angry about." Marie sent her first confidential reports to Paris, but every line she wrote was filled with mixed emotions. She noted the people's loyalty to Traoré as dangerous, but deep inside, she secretly envied the love they had for him. One night, during a private discussion at the presidential office, Traoré looked at Marie intently. "You've worked for many countries, but I want to ask you something. Have you ever loved any country?" Marie pursed her lips. She had never truly had a homeland. Born in Marseille, raised in NATO psychological training camps, traveling through more than 20 countries like a shadow, she only belonged to directives and codes. "Maybe. I've never loved anything long enough to call it mine," she replied. Traoré remained silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "Then here, don't talk about nations or strategies. Let's talk about people. In Burkina Faso, I am not trying to build a strong state, but a strong heart for the nation." Marie fell into deep thought. She had never heard a leader use the word heart to describe the ideal of governance. Then it happened. One night in April, she received a directive from Paris. Activate the delirium plan. A fake video would be spread, creating a corruption conspiracy involving Traoré and a Russian businessman. Her task was to convince a close advisor to the president to react wrongly, creating division within the government. Marie had everything prepared. She had set up the psychological context. But at the very moment she was about to send the final code to Paris, she hesitated. She looked into the eyes of the young advisor, a man who had lived in a refugee camp, who Traoré had supported from obscurity to become the strategic brain of the operation. Marie couldn't. She couldn't destroy that trust. She turned off the device. The next day, a leaked report from inside France revealed the delirium plan, sent by an anonymous figure to the Burkinabe government. Marie knew she had crossed a line with no turning back. That evening, Traoré invited her to a simple thatched hut on the edge of the forest. No bodyguards, no papers, just the sound of cicadas and ginger tea. He asked, "Who have you betrayed?" Us, or your own France? Marie looked at him for a long time. Finally, she said, I don't know anymore, but I have chosen people over strategy. Traoré nodded. That's the only thing that makes a spy truly human. The next day, Marie Delacourt disappeared from the French embassy's records. A brief note was sent to Paris. I am resigning from my mission. Burkina Faso doesn't need a saboteur. They need people who understand that justice does not come from power but from courage. I choose to stay, to learn that. 3 months later, a new advisor quietly appeared in President Traoré's office, responsible for the psychological recovery program for war veterans, orphaned children, and victims of violence. No one knew her background. They only called her Marie, and sometimes people would see her standing silently before the Burkina Faso flag, her eyes sad, but this time, not empty. After the decision to abandon her mission and stay in Burkina Faso, Marie was not welcomed as a hero. In the eyes of many of Traoré's close officials, she remained a potential risk, a rogue piece on the board that could turn against them at any time. But Traoré did not think that way. He did not assign her any position of power. Instead, he suggested, you once understood people's psychology to divide them. Now use that to heal. Here we have too many wounds that no one dares to touch. Marie began her new work in a small room inside a rehabilitation center for veterans and orphaned children, known as the Silent House. Each day, she listened for hours to blood-soaked stories. A 12-year-old boy who had been forced into becoming a mercenary, a woman tortured by foreign proxy forces, an old officer who lost his entire family in last year's coup. Marie no longer used complex psychological jargon. She listened with the emptiness that she carried from her past. One time, a child asked her, "Did you ever get beaten?" Marie froze for a moment, then smiled. "No. But sometimes people use words to strike at your heart, and those wounds take a long time to heal." However, Marie knew well, the past doesn't easily let go. One June afternoon, while walking through the Kaya market, a man approached her, handed her a small paper bag, and then disappeared into the crowd. Inside was a memory card, containing recordings of all the secret calls between her and Paris during her mission, and a line printed in French. "We haven't forgotten. Deadline. 30 days. Marie understood. Her former agency had begun to take action. They wouldn't publicly prosecute her. Just planting seeds of doubt would be enough to make the entire system in Burkina Faso turn against her. She had two choices: run away or confess everything. That night, Marie knocked on Traoré's office door. She placed the memory card on the table. "I used to work for them. This is the evidence. They want to burn me, and you, from the inside." Traoré said nothing for a long time. He opened the window, letting the breeze fill the silent room. "Do you think I don't know your past?" he asked. "Do you think we allowed someone like you to stay without watching?" Marie was stunned. Traoré turned back, his eyes sharp as knives. "Marie, I don't need you to be clean. I need you to be brave. Here, no one is innocent. But if you dare to step beyond your past, you will do what the best spies in France have never done: rebuild the soul of a nation." She lowered her head. In that moment, Marie was no longer a psychologist, no longer a spy, no longer a pawn. She was just a woman learning how to be human again. In the weeks that followed, Marie was no longer the silent shadow. She stood up and organized group therapy sessions for those who had been on both sides of the conflict: veterans, rebel fighters, victims, and perpetrators, children who had lost their parents and former officers who had given the orders to shoot. For the first time, people sat across from each other, not with guns, but with tears. Marie didn't use flowery words. She simply shared her own story. The story of someone who had been trained to break others' minds, only to realize that the hardest thing wasn't control, but saying sorry. An elderly woman who had lost 2 sons in the coup had once stood up and thrown stones at Marie when she learned she was French. But by the 3rd session, she came in silently and handed Marie a bag of cashews. "You're not like them," she said softly. "You know pain." It was during this time that Marie discovered a leak from inside the government, done by another spy posing as a humanitarian advisor. She didn't report it to the police. She quietly approached him and used the very techniques she had been taught, touching on fears, evoking guilty memories, making him admit everything. But this time, she didn't send any reports anywhere. She simply went to see Traoré, told him everything, and said, "I can't end the darkness, but I can stop it from spreading." Traoré smiled sadly. Sometimes, the one who knows the darkest side holds the light the longest. A year later, Marie's therapy program was expanded to many conflict zones. International organizations began offering to collaborate. But Marie still refused the fame. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to do right by the part of herself she had once lost. Once, during a seminar, a journalist asked her, "If you had the chance to return to being a spy, would you?" Marie replied slowly,